It's all for you. No, don't.
What was going through my brain was, this is so jarring. Like, we just went from 0 to 100. Like,
This church has maintained power for thousands of years.
It's not real. 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 It's not real.
If you look at the negative critiques, and I mean, it's Jake and I too can say this, it's all 90% of it is screenplay based.
they were right there the whole time for me. Like, I was like, oh, this is gonna have a dark ending. Let's go.
Now, I would say it's my favorite horror movie of the year so far.
Are you committing? Are you doing the whole thing?
I don't know
Yeah,
if I
he
do
is.
the whole thing, but I have to at least put my defenses up.
Hang on, if we're gonna wear squid hats, hang on now.
You have a squid hat?
I'm sorry, are you prepared for this situation?
This is so important.
I don't have a squid hat.
Dylan.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
I didn't know this was a thing. Look at that, and it's different.
Wow.
Wow.
I can't believe you were prepared for this situation.
I'm always ready.
I wasn't ready for that. All right, I'm just not gonna mention it.
No,
Yeah.
let's just go. Let's just run it.
I feel severely underdressed now. Thank you guys. Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, I am here with two wonderful guests. Obviously, we've seen them on here before. If you've seen our Pooniverse spoiler discussion for Blood and Honey 2, we have Evan over there from Rocklin Graves, looking completely normal as ever, and of course Jake, the king of rats, Killjoy Jake, joining us. And yeah, today we're discussing a little bit of a controversial topic. I think is the easiest thing to say here, because yeah, it's been interesting. We've heard a lot of positive things about the new Omen film, the first Omen, and we've all gotten a chance to see it. And I think we're all feeling a little bit different here. I think I don't know, Jake. Are you're feeling like that movie was all right? You know, that was okay. It wasn't like best of the year material or anything by any means. Evan, how are you feeling about?
Well,
First
Dylan,
Omen?
now that you mention it, I've been really thinking about doing a lot of self-reflection over the last 24 hours since I walked into the movie theater and saw the first Omen. I do, in fact, I would say it's my favorite horror movie of the year so far. I had an absolute blast with it, which is why I know that this podcast is going to be very interesting, because I'm once again on an island of my own. I loved it. I love religious horror in general. I love the Omen sort of franchise. The first and the third movies I really like. But this new one is not only my favorite Omen sequel, but it's so far my favorite horror movie of the year.
And that is your opinion, sir, and you're allowed to have it. No, I actually think that's awesome. I know you've been really looking forward to this. Obviously, for those of you who may not know, you should go over to Evan's channel and check out his Omen review series. You started that when was the first one dropped?
January?
Like January?
Yeah, something like that.
It's been a few months. He did the entire franchise, and yeah, they're really awesome. So you guys should go check those videos out. Jake, inform our audience here. How are you feeling about the first Omen?
Well, you see, Dylan, unlike the squid on my head, I was not happy about the first Omen film. I wouldn't call this movie bad by any means. I don't think it was a bad movie. I just think it was a bad Omen prequel. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like this is a super professional looking film. I think the direction from first time feature filmmaker Arkasha Stevenson is fantastic. Nell Tiger Free gives an excellent performance. The connections to the original film are like almost nonsensical at a few points in the third act, and it just really took me out of it. Like, I was really digging the movie up until we get to the entire birthing sequence at the end. Are we spoiling things yet?
Oh yeah, no.
This is a full spoiler discussion. You're good.
This is all spoilers, so everybody can say whatever they want.
Yeah, no restrictions.
I just can't believe I just can't believe Superman shows up at the end and kills Damien. It completely ruins the lore. No, but seriously, I don't know. I was really vibing with this movie. I was digging the slow burn feel and all that. There was some nice homages to the original film. I do have a lot of positive things to say about it. But I don't know. The moment we get into the birthing scene, it's just so underwhelming. Like a C-section for the Antichrist? Come on now. Like I remember hearing Arkasha Stevenson talking about how like hyping up a birthing sequence, and then it's like not even a minute of the movie as a dumb little jump scare early on. I just felt like that was really disappointing. I was really expecting the birth of the Antichrist to be like the big showcase of this movie, and that ended up just being a little blip of the third act. So I don't know. I left the theater a little underwhelmed. But it's not to say that this movie is bad. Once again, I feel like there's so many good scare sequences. There's some really disgusting and surprisingly shocking moments about it. So it's a mixed bag for me personally. I really loved a lot of it, and then I really just wasn't crazy about the back half.
Yeah. As far as I go, I mean, I was super into this movie at points. I think that the opening was really strong. I thought that there was some moments as we kind of got towards the third act that were just so mixed that it became frustrating. It got to the point where like the little references, the big one being obviously the "It's All for You" sequence. Yeah. That and I can say, seeing your review, Evan, I totally agree with your take on that. Where it's just that one to me, I think was the first straw that broke for me, and I was just like, man, that just felt so much like, okay, we have to do something that's like the first movie. We got to do it, and we got to do it harder, and we got to make it more intense because it's a modern or like kind of origin story retelling, and it just felt so. That's when it felt like a movie. That was when I got sucked out, and I would say that was my biggest issue with the film is that there were moments when I was so into it. The direction is beautiful. I think the cast is excellent. And they're selling everything to me, but then I just get yanked out. And I'm just like finding myself having to get back into the groove of things. And it just was a very rocky, bumpy experience, all in all.
That's really interesting to me because it seems like we're kind of like experiencing the movie in the opposite direction. Because I wasn't hating the first act of the movie, but it was very slow, and I wasn't super engaged in what was going on yet because Margaret hadn't really been fleshed out, and she was still very much in her like reserved religious state where I just wasn't getting much of her character, so I was finding it a little hard to get invested. But then after she witnesses the demon hand cooch projection, I was like, oh, okay, so this movie's got a little, it's got a little more going on than I thought. And then once we get into the second act, I was starting to enjoy it more when it starts to get a lot more sort of artsy and dreamlike in some ways. And then by the time the third act hits, I'm going, this is fucking awesome. I haven't had this much fun in a theater this year. I don't know, Jake, if you talked about it. You did talk about it in your video, where she gets out of her right after the car crash and she's like convulsing.
Yeah.
I was like blown away by how opposite a reaction I had to that.
Yeah.
Where I was like, that's one of the coolest physical performances I've seen in a while. And also the way that I was interpreting that was like, she was essentially developing two entire babies at once within like a 20-second period while being like infested with this demonic energy that was coming along with it. And her performance of just like jutting around and the way that her muscles were moving so unnaturally was so cool, especially because we don't have any moments like that from her up to that point in the movie. She doesn't have any scenes where she's like being possessed by something. So then to see this come out of nowhere while we're watching this really like unholy thing happen, I thought was really cool. I thought when that started, I was like, she's about to turn into a jackal and give birth to Damien. That's what's gonna. I thought that's what was happening.
That would have been sick.
I thought we were about to get like an American Werewolf in London type transformation scene, which I think would have been fucking awesome.
It would have been incredible.
It would have been honestly. So cool. Like that would have been really a very cool way of like tying in the movies, and I think then it would have been like a fucking flawless prequel if they had just like gone with it that way.
To kind of piggyback off of that, I think like what was going through my head when I was watching that is like you just said like she hadn't really had a moment like that before, and I think that's what was going through my brain was this is so jarring. Like we just went from 0 to 100 like way too fast, and I think I was kind of in this mindset with the movie of this is going to be a slow burn. Like we're slowly going to dive into this tragedy of the Antichrist being born because we all know that's where this is going, and it just like the whole third act doesn't feel as tragic to me as it should. I think like the original The Omen is a little goofy, admittedly, but I think there's something about that ending that just spells this like
It's
apocalyptic.
dreadful,
Yeah. It's so apocalyptic and dreadful, and you think like the end of the world is coming. Like after the events of all this, like that's it. That's going to be the end of the world. I guess I didn't feel that like with how the movie ends. And well, let's stay on topic here. We'll get to that. Point being, I think her like making all the crazy noises in the street, I just felt like it was a little much. I wish she would have just like fell to the ground and had her belly start to like grow with the baby. That was enough. That would have done it for me. It just felt a little too much for me. And I think that just comes from, we have a first time filmmaker here. She's trying to impress, and there, why, how can I complain about that? I guess is my point. So no, I totally get digging that scene though.
And I agree. I think that the performance I don't have an issue with. I think that it's very raw and it's very tough to commit to doing something like that. I saw Stuckman's review before we got on here, and he compared that to Possession, and that's actually a perfect one-to-one comparison. If you guys have ever seen that movie, there's a scene in a subway that's absolutely insane. But it's one of those things for me, dude, where I think the sequence just goes on a little too long. I think at one point in your review, Jake, you said she like balks like a chicken. And I was just like, dude, I had that same thought when she was making some of those noises, and I just was like, I appreciate how hard she committed to that, and I appreciate that that's what they were going for, but there's only so much of that I can really like get on board with before I'm like, okay, this is getting a little goofy. This is starting to feel a little bit like a sketch. It was tough for me to stay engaged with that. And then honestly, like I get a lot of crap for this for people because like the thing that annoys me about the Alien movies is the gestational periods for the fucking babies. The chest bursters is so inconsistent. So like we're led to believe that the night she goes to the club, she gets essentially essayed by the jackal. And there's like hardly anything as far as just like the baby growing or anything like that for a couple of days until like almost a week's time, and then it just happens right then and there. And Evan, I was hoping you could kind of clear some of that up for me if you know some of this, because like, does all the growth have to happen on that date? I thought that was just the date that he had to be born.
Well,
because that was what confused me. It was just one of those things where it's almost like it felt like, oh shit, yeah, we gotta get the baby in here.
Right.
Hold on.
I think that part of it was that they didn't want her to know that she was having this bizarre thing, because if you started to get very suddenly pregnant in like 3 days, you would go to a hospital immediately. And we can see that they didn't want her to get to a hospital. That was why they crashed into the car immediately, because they were trying to get to a surgeon who would basically give her an abortion to get the Antichrist out of her. So I think that if she had something come up that quickly, she probably would have been a little concerned. I would be.
And I'm sorry, I just want to say, for clarification's sake, I'm not saying that it had like that sequence happening and it kind of going like Mach speed, like at that point, like that's cool, but I just felt like they reference that she essentially the gimmick, or what they're trying to say is that she slept with the guy that he was at the club with, and she got pregnant, was kind of what her thought was. But they kind of never like they should have made that more of like a point, I feel like, because after a while it just felt like, okay, we're moving on from that didn't happen, like, it is what it is. They never reference it. She's not looking to take a pregnancy test. She did a little prayer, got spooked, and then that was it. And I get there's a lot going on, but like at the same time, it's just kind of one of those things where I was just like, I feel like if she was that worried about it, she would have at least maybe been trying to make that more of a priority, to be like, am I pregnant? Am I not? And then I can totally buy her being like, okay, I got to get this out of me, whilst figuring out that it's
Yeah.
Damien,
I
and then all that happens.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I also don't think that she thought that they hooked up that night, because the way that her friend talked to her was like you were getting a little friendly with them. Like she kind of hinted that it didn't quite go as far as it could have. So maybe like I interpreted that as a lot of the guilt that she was feeling was just about kind of getting herself to a position where that looked like that was the direction things were going, and she's so religiously sheltered that that brought her a shame that made her feel like she needed to find penance for this sin that she was on track to commit. But to me, the way that her friend was talking implied to me that there hadn't been something that happened between them. That's
She
how I
did
took
lick
that.
his face.
She did lick his face. And I've only heard of someone getting pregnant from face licks once, so the odds
Oh,
of it are
okay.
not.
It is very rare.
It's exceedingly rare. So I don't think I don't think that would have been a concern.
You never know. I mean, you never know, though. Man.
You never
No,
know.
I'm
If you ever lick someone's face, take a pregnancy test. It doesn't matter if you lick their face or they licked your face, or if you're, whatever sex you are, take a pregnancy test.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I heard it can happen from just sharing a cup with somebody. If you share a drink or sit on a toilet seat.
Oh, we've all been there once or twice.
I'm just saying. Anyway, let's kind of go into, I guess, what I kind of had structured out, and I kind of think we've kind of jumped into some stuff already, but I want to ask, moving past kind of overall impressions, what are some of your guys' favorite moments? Now, Jake, what was like your favorite, like if you had to say a couple of standout moments, or was there like an overall moment that was just like, that was it for me? I really enjoyed that.
My absolute favorite moment of this film, without a doubt, is when you see Margaret watch the one girl like that's giving birth or whatever. Like that is so visceral to me and so well done. You know what? We're talking positives. Let's keep this positive. I think that scene is so disgusting and so well done.
Oh, gets under my skin, dude. I was
Yeah.
squirming in the theater.
And I remember
I didn't
seeing
mind it.
Okay,
Yeah?
all right,
Were-
dude.
Were you kind of into it a little bit? That's the way you're talking about it.
Sorry?
Were you into that a little bit? Like was
Continue. I don't want to interrupt your point.
what it okay.
We're in the-
It was
we're in the
getting me a
middle of
little
something.
hot and bothered. No, I'm kidding. But I really, I think the thing about it that is so gross is like just it's so unnatural. It's a hand coming out of a vagina. Jesus Christ. Like this is unholy. Something is wrong here. When I saw the poster for the first time of like the demon hand, I'm like, ooh, are we actually going to see like the jackal? Are we actually going to see like the demon in this thing? That was really satisfying to me as well. Like I thought that was that was cool. It's like, okay, that's really fun. I'm going to say one negative thing and then I'm going to pass the torch. I do wish we got that scene during the actual birthing of Damien. Like, I was kind of imagining, like, the hand would come out, and it's like, here's the baby presented to you. Here's the
Yeah,
Antichrist.
Yeah, you said that in your video, and I was like, that is really cool. That would have been awesome.
I love that. And I think I'll go next just because I know Evan's probably got a lot to say on this side of it. So, well, I'm not even shitting on you. I just know that, like, you are the positive, the real big positive one in this conversation. So I want to give you the floor for this side of it. But like, I have to agree with you. That scene was super impactful to me. Oddly enough, I think one of my favorite moments that just really, I think, cemented me as like a fan of this director was I really enjoyed the club scene. I really enjoyed the chemistry that was built there. I felt like, as far as the acting goes and everything, I thought that was really clever, really well done. And once the music starts building and then we cut to black and you wake up and it's that close-up shot of her laying on the bed and the spider and everything, I was just like, that was the first moment I think I can fully say that I was like, all right, I'm in. I'm on board. The movie is going. This is great. And again, that's what makes it even more disappointing when we kind of move forward and then you get sucked out and then you get back in. I really love that. I have to agree with you, Jake. I think that scene's also great that you mentioned there. But if I had to say my favorite scare is probably my favorite scene, and it's the scene where she's in the what they call it, the dark room,
The bad room.
the bad room, and yeah, the other nun comes to visit again, and she's all toasty.
That's
harrowing
awesome.
stuff. I love
Yeah.
how that was done.
That
I
was sick.
absolutely was just like so unsettled. I literally like lifted my feet up off the ground a little bit because I was just like, oh my god, seeing just that shape. Because at a moment there, I thought maybe that was the jackal that was going to come
Yeah.
forward. But seeing that shape just kind of rise, and then you start to realize what it is. Expert, expert class horror direction, presentation, execution. I loved that. And that was by far, I still get chills thinking about that.
That was my favorite scare of the movie. I said in my video that there was like one image in the movie that's the scariest thing I've seen all year so far. That was the image I was referring to because the whole and it's not just the image, it's the whole sequence, the way that they build up to it. Where like I don't remember what she says, but someone responds and then she immediately is like, "Who says that?" And it's this really creepy thing where then it goes silent and you're like, "Oh, it's just going to be a disembodied voice." But then you're like, "We're focusing on this dark corner for a really long time." And I'm starting to hear something. Something's going on back there. The sound design in this fucking movie is stellar.
It's
It
very
is
well done.
so good. It was one of those things where I didn't expect them to take as much advantage of like surround sound as they did. A lot of it is Mark Corvin's score. Who Mark Corvin is just a fucking genius. The guy's amazing. I do want to talk about the music at some point because
You're
Jesus
good.
Christ. The way that, as you were saying, like we're kind of slowly trying to fill in the blanks of what exactly we're looking at in the corner, and then the way she was moving was so. I mean, I was giddy. I was like beaming for that whole sequence. That was the most giddy I've been in a theater this year. Just sitting there like, this is amazing. And then she gets closer and closer, and you're like, you just start reeling back. You're, like, you're getting too close for comfort. It was that. Very oddly, I'm going to throw this out as I think the moment that really sold me on the movie. And this is weird, and I can't quite pinpoint why this is. I think it's just my Robert Eggers fanboy brain coming through, because I was saying to Dylan before you joined in, Jake, that there's a sort of sprinkle of Eggers in this movie, who is my favorite director. So if you bring that in, it's a sucker punch for me, and I can't handle it. But there was a scene, I can't remember even where it happens in the movie, but the camera is like above the city and it's kind of like dancing around for a second. Like there's these like flittering eyes watching her in the room. And then it transitions to her laying on the bed with this like deep blue light on her. And then we get that fade in with the spiders. There was something
Yeah.
like ethereal and dreamy about that scene. I think that was the point where I went from like, oh, I really like this movie, to literally like for the rest of the thing, just like kind of being entranced by it. The way that scene was executed, there was something about it. I mean, Stevenson's direction is amazing, and it's present the whole movie. But I think that was the moment where I was like, oh, this is like legit. The thing that really surprised me was how like artsy she was with it, because you don't, you hear of like legacy sequels and you don't think like these really like creative artistic decisions. This is something you would expect to see from like Neon or A24 with the execution of it.
Yep.
And to see it in like a $30 million 20th Century Fox horror film was really surprising to me. And I mean, I really enjoy that kind of stuff. Like I like art house horror when it's done right. It can obviously be very pretentious and boring if it's done for the wrong reasons. But there was a touch of that in this movie that really won me over. And that moment was, probably, aside from the scare in the bedroom, was my favorite scene in the movie, which is weird because there's nothing actually happening. It was just a vibe thing.
But it's a gorgeous film.
It is, man. It's beautiful to look. Like I was saying, it's like they're painting with the camera. Like it's just gorgeous.
I think that's something I think as far as positives go, we can all agree with, is just that no matter how we feel about the film, and we made this very apparent in our review, was that Akasha Stevenson has already cemented herself right now as a up and coming director to look out for.
Yeah.
More or less, I know
100%,
that
yeah.
this is, if she doesn't do another Omen film, which we're going to have to talk about that ending, because that's a huge piece. I tasked Evan with kind of compiling all of the retcons and things to really kind of guide us in at the end. But I'm so curious to see what she does, and I hope she does something original.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
not like a
me
dig.
too.
I
No,
want to
me too.
see her do. I want to see her take the chains off, because I think one of the issues with this film, and we kind of break this down in our review, because people on the channel know, Jake, I don't know how much you know, but he's a big screenwriter. He loves screenwriting. That's his main thing. So he was very curious. And actually you brought this up in your review too, was the writing and just how many writers there were on this.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of writers. There's like 3 people with the screenplay and 1 for story credit.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
And it's just one of those things where it's like a film like this, the way that it's being presented visually, and the way that it's like the scares, the horror, the body horror elements, all of it, the way it's put together, and the editing, all feels very singular, vision focused. And that's all Akasha Stevenson, and I can tell just from the way everything looks and just the amount of praise that the film has gotten from that aspect. If you look at the negative critiques, and I mean, it's Jake and I too can say this, it's all 90% of it is screenplay based, because
100%.
it just doesn't work for some of us. And I mean, like, I think that's totally fair, and I'm happy that a lot of people really are into it, but there are issues, and I really think that it comes down to just having too many cooks in the kitchen. And that's why I think, like, Akasha gets a huge pass on this, because you can see her vision in here. She just got barred down by the fact that you've got 3 other writers in here who are all making a prequel to the Omen, where she's just making a fucking horror movie about the Antichrist being born.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And that's where really, I think, another key frustration for me.
Dude,
Sorry,
I mean,
I just went on a rant. So.
No, I like 100% my thoughts exactly. Like Arkasha Stevenson made such an impression with this film that I will be at her next thing like day one, like opening night. I'm there. I really like it. Really just comes down to connections to the original Omen. If this was like its own thing, I would fucking love this. But like it's the thing that. You were just talking about all the retcons. Damien has a twin sister that I don't care about. Like, I'm sorry. That was like the last nail in the coffin for me. When that happened, I'm like, I'm out. Like, I checked out of the film kind of at that point. But it really is the writing. Like, just the way that this thing fizzles out just totally took me out of it, of an otherwise so artsy and so inventive in terms of style, in terms of tone. I was so into this film for such a long time, and then the writing, it was just so glaring. It kind of just took me out of it. The whole scene at the cabin, I just felt was so unnecessary, and I don't know. This had an opportunity to be a movie like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, where it's like, here's this tragedy that is well earned. It's not like a shock. It's not like a in your face. No, this is something that has to happen. This is a movie that can end poorly, and it won't offend audiences that badly because we already know what's coming next. And I just think from a writing perspective specifically, they had a missed opportunity here to do something just truly awful, in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, I think this could have been such a tragic, like, heart-wrenching horror film, and it kind of ended up trying to have this like somewhat pseudo happy ending. I don't know. It really took me out of it really took me out of it, and maybe it is because I had a level of expectation going into this. That could absolutely be part of it, and maybe I'm a little blinded, but I don't know. I was just really expecting this to be like the most tragic birth of the Antichrist that is going to turn into the apocalypse at some point in the future, and I just never found myself feeling that way about the third act personally.
And can I say one thing? Do you feel like that kind of got taken away from you with the fact, because I kind of feel that way, because she's like, burn them both. I didn't know if she was referencing the baby and her and Margaret, or if she's mentioning the jackal and Margaret. Either way, the fact that they were just going to leave the baby in there to burn, and it's probably my fucking paternal instincts kicking in, but like, I'm just sitting there like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you're just going to let a fucking baby burn in there, and she's dying. She's just got stabbed. She's burning to death. And then, they're just letting the jackal go too. I was sitting there when that shot came up of her face in the fire. I was just sitting there like, this is gonna end dark as fuck, and I'm like, this might save the movie for me, and it just kept going, and I was just like, Don't do
Dude,
that.
they
Don't
were
do
they
that.
were they were right there the whole time for
know.
me. Like I was like, oh, this is gonna have a dark ending. Let's go, and then it just never got there for me personally.
I
Alright,
mean, I
Evan,
thought it was going
it's
to
all
happen
you.
too. There was a part of me where I was like, oh, I thought she was just going to stab the baby. And as you said, Jake, I was like, oh, it's just
Oh,
gonna
I
be the
thought
wrong
that too.
baby. Like
Yeah.
she's going to kill it, and then it's going to be the wrong one, and then that's how the movie's going to end. And it's like that would have been crazy. I do think I do want to acknowledge here that I can very easily be blinded by style in movies. You know, like as I was saying, Robert Eggers fanboy style, like the vibe of something goes such a long way for me that like if there are certain elements like the final scene of the movie, I'm like, all right, it's fine. Like it doesn't bother me, but I also think that that's fully possibly because I was just so drawn into the feeling of the movie. And like
Nothing wrong with that, dude.
the
Nothing wrong with that
location,
at
like
all.
I
Like-
love snowy cabins. I'm a sucker for snowy cabins. And I also found the setup that they kind of, or at least where they left the characters, I found it really intriguing because introducing a twin sister for Damien, where like if you ask me, hey, what would be a cool direction to take an Omen franchise? I would never even consider like introduce a twin sister for him. I think the thing that left me feeling less frustrated with the ending was that I find the thought of I don't know if they're going to do it, but of a potential continuation where the church is kind of hunting them down, and then we have this child that we're not sure if they're the Antichrist because the Antichrist is male. So we don't actually know what the nature of this child is, but there's obviously going to be something wrong with her because she wasn't exactly conceived naturally. And I mean, that just like as someone who like loves storytelling and loves really like weird turns in stories, I find that to be a really intriguing angle to explore of somewhat similar to one of the things I really like about Omen 3, where we have this like race against time of the church chasing after Damien. I kind of had that thing where I was like, oh, this is a kind of intriguing setup for a continuation. But like it is one of those things where like people say what their issues are with the ending. I'm like, that, I mean, that makes total sense. Like I do get it. I just didn't feel as frustrated with the writing decisions that they made. I think I was so into the direction they took the story, and the retcons I thought were justified by what the movie did on its own. I do think that I was enjoying this a lot more as just a standalone movie. I wasn't really thinking of it as an Omen prequel for the whole thing. But I also
would have
don't.
said like, sorry, if you even would have said this was like a straight remake,
Yeah,
I think I would have, oddly enough, been more on board, because at least the idea of introducing two and having all that, it would have been a little easier for me to kind of go. And granted, I just rewatched the first Omen, not, the original Omen, like 2 weeks ago. And like, it's been a long time since I've seen that. Very similar to my Exorcist experience. Watched it and I was just like, damn, fucking great. Loved it. Richard Donner's fingerprints are all over that film. You can tell that it's just, that is like the best part of like Akasha Stevenson stuff, is like when you can sense the fingerprints of a true visionary on it. And that's what that film is. And plus it's got the benefit of being a 70s film and having that 70s style filmmaking where it's like, we're not really trying to tell a horror movie. We're just making a movie and we're going to put some horror elements in it, and then we'll figure that out. And it's like, that's the thing that we just don't see anymore.
there was a really cool like blending of stylistic approach from Stevenson in this movie, where there's a lot of stuff, especially earlier on, where it felt like something that was shot in the 70s. Like there's a lot of handheld shots.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of like actual like optical zooming, which you
Yeah.
don't often see a lot of the time. And I was like, oh, there's like interesting visual stuff going on here. But then when the movie gets into some more like cerebral territory, then you get this different approach to the cinematography, and just that amount of thought going into the direction is something that I appreciate so much. And it was one of the things that I think really sucked me into the movie. And I mean, that translates to the score as well, because Mark Corvin writes music that feels very classical in nature for the earlier scenes, and then it kind of switches up and morphs into a more experimental approach to it because the movie is getting more cerebral. And I just found that like evolution of the vibe of the movie so engaging. It was one of those things where like I was just completely sucked into it.
Dude, I do feel you about the 70s vibe of the first half.
Yeah.
I think that's what sucked me in immediately, because like this might be a hot take, but like the 70s is my favorite time for horror movies like ever. Like I love 70s horror movies. They just have a certain vibe about them that no other decade in my opinion has. I love it. And what you were talking about, those slow zooms on things, like that's so creepy.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies of all time is Zombie 1979, or like Zombie Flesh Eater. It has like a million titles, but I love that movie to death because of how it's shot. So much of it is so scary, and it does that. It just, these slow zooms on these like monsters that are slowly picking up these like pieces of flesh and eating them. There's something so creepy about that, and I think modern horror is much more about the jump scare, about like doing something really quick in your face, but 70s horror is so good at doing the creepy and slow shit, and that to me is like I can't get enough of that. I feel like the first half of this movie I really connected with those elements. There's so many scary moments that you can pinpoint that are like, this feels so 70s, and it's so effective for that reason. And it kind of has that throwback sense to it as well. I think, like, I don't know, I guess I just wasn't crazy about the evolution. Like, I hate to disagree, you know, but I don't know. I was just so vibing with the way that they were setting this up to make it feel like such a throwback film. I was like, okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going deeper into this, you know? And I think it does lose that at a certain time. But it does feel like nothing about this, I don't know, it does feel very motivated. Like, I think I see so many movies nowadays that don't feel motivated. Like, Dylan, you were just saying that a second ago. Like, let's just write a movie and put horror stuff in there. I think Imaginary is a great example of that. Like, that is, this is just, let's just try to pump something up. Yeah. Honestly, good on you. Yeah. I wish I could, I wish I would have done the same. No, but I think that style is so important, and when you do see something like that in movies, it is very important to praise, because otherwise you get movies like Imaginary or Night Swim where it's just like, here is just okay, we're gonna make a pool scary, we're gonna make an imaginary friend scary, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, man, I would rather have a vision. I would rather have just, you can look at this Coke can and say this is scary now, you know what I mean? Anyone can do that, but it takes a true visionary, like you guys were saying, to make something that really feels like a dream, like this film. And I think that is special about this movie. I feel I was a little harsh on it in my review. I gave it like a 5 out of 10, but I will say, I think that element of this film is so strong. I totally see how it could outweigh the writing. I
just find it really exciting when you get a movie that's like on a platform like from 20th Century Fox with a budget like this, where it feels so inspired. Like, there's nothing that feels cynical when you're watching this movie. It really, you can tell that like Stevenson was passionate about what she was making here, and that like bleeds through every frame, which I think is part of the reason that I walked away so excited from it, was because I just wasn't expecting to see so much like emotion from the filmmaker in it. It was, I don't know, it worked.
And I think that's I agree with you, but again, that's why I think the parts that pull me out so hard is because it is just kind of an odd mix of, you know, okay, we're doing the very passionate, very inspired filmmaking thing, and then we're just kind of, oh shit, yeah, it's an Omen movie, it's a big studio movie, we got to do this stuff, because it feels like she got to make some of her movie, but then the studio was like, well, we got to do this to scare the teens, and we got to do this to get audiences in here to say, ooh, that was creepy. Because, like, I'll give you a juxtaposition. Two things I love. One thing that I love was the speaking of 70s style and just how that worked and all that, I adored the shot of, what was the little girl's name?
Carlita,
sitting at the picnic table, and the hand coming over, and then the visual recall of that with the same nun, but she was all burned. That is pure 70s style filmmaking. It's slow, it's not too on the nose, it's just that reveal, you know what's coming, but it's just there in your face, and that's what it is. It feels very much like a movie I love called Don't Look Now, if you guys haven't seen it. It's fantastic, I highly recommend it. But it's one of those things where that was excellent, And then we have scenes like when she's just first gets to her apartment and she's praying, and then the nun jump scares her, and it's like, why? Like, why did we just go to like the Nun 2 all of a sudden? Like, that's what it just felt like to me. It felt like that was the caliber of horror that I was sitting down for at that moment. I'm just like, why did we do that? Like, that just made no sense to me.
I think what that was just a manifestation of her being like basically blood relatives with the devil, right? Like she was conceived of this blasphemous secret in the base of the church. And obviously, I mean, you know, she's going to birth the Antichrist. There's some spiritual shit attached to her. So to me, those moments, that jump scare for whatever reason, that got me. Like I never jump ever, but I was like that actually caught me off guard.
The car accident got me.
I think part of it,
I shuddered. I was like, oh shit.
part of it was just like the jump scares didn't often come with like the big like boogaloo music that you expect from that kind of thing. It was like it would be a sound from the thing that was jumping out at you, or it would be a little more of a subtle jump scare sound, which isn't surprising again because it's Mark Corvin and the dude's a wizard. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying because it's such a generic thing to have like a nun jump out at someone, like, especially recently. I mean, we've had so many like the Nun movies happen, and we just had Immaculate, and we just had now we have this. There's a lot of like religious horror movies coming around with like nuns and convents and that kind of thing. It's, by the way, it's hilarious that this and Immaculate came out like 2 weeks apart because there is so much in common narratively.
They're so similar.
They are so similar. Yeah, but yeah, to me, it was just like a manifestation of the evil that was kind of intertwined with her.
I do want to throw something else in there about like the Conjuring comparisons with this movie. Like I see so many people who are like this is nothing.
That.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people are like, this is nothing like the Conjuring. I think honestly, like my thing with it walking out of the theater was, you know, the jump scares are one thing, you know what I mean? Like whatever. I mean, anyone can make that comparison. Oh, you know, jump scares, Conjuring, same thing. No, I actually that I disagree with. To me, what left me thinking this is trying to be the Conjuring was they were trying to set up like this whole story. They were trying to set up another movie. And that's just what I feel the Conjuring is kind of turned into. Like the Nun 2 is just, a lot of it is just trying to set up Conjuring 4. And like, I'm like, okay, I don't know if I care or not anymore. And there was a lot of how that movie ended that just made me think of the Nun 2. Like, and I guess that's kind of why, like I even put it in my thumbnail. I'm like, is this just the Nun 3 or whatever?
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
And I know that maybe that's an unfair comparison, but I just, to me, seeing them trying to set up another movie, it was just like, why are we doing this like Marvel Conjuring universe stuff in this otherwise very artsy, really professional and well done movie? Like I just like let your art stand on its own, and if people want more, people will want more, and then you'll make something else. They found a way to make an Omen prequel. And, you know, they didn't have those intentions back in 1976 with the original film. So why wouldn't you be able to make another one sometime after? I don't know. I think if that movie would have just tried to be its own thing, you know what I mean? And just stayed there and not try to like, let's set up another movie with a twin sister we never knew about before. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. That's, I don't know, just my 2 cents.
That totally makes sense. And I absolutely get that. Like it does seem like, It does cheapen the conclusion of the movie to kind of be like, oh, but there's more. Even if I did find some of the ideas that are potentially explored in continuations if they happen, even if I found those intriguing, I do think that overall, especially if we don't get a continuation, it kind of leaves you feeling like, what?
Very strange.
Right.
Like it's a very odd, because you get to the last 10 minutes of the movie and you're like, oh, we just set up another 3 acts.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a lot that just got established in those last 10 minutes. But again, I think it's one of those things where the movie's faults were just so overshadowed for me by what it was doing well. Like seeing the other nun driving down the street in like a very similar shot to the opening of the Omen, and then having them, you know, pull out Robert Thorne's picture and that.
Yeah.
Kind of dovetailing into where the first movie picked off, and it ending literally on the same night that the first movie picks up. I think I was so sucked into that thing that was going on that once it got to the stuff in the cabin, I was kind of just like, I'm already satisfied, and that didn't actively take away anything from what I was feeling. Which, I mean, you know, it doesn't mean that it's not a problem. Like I would say that those are like issues with the movie, but they didn't bother me.
No, I get that. And I think now would probably be the best time, Evan, if you want to kind of guide us through some of the retcons and things that have kind of changed from this film and
Mm.
kind of fishtail that into where you would like to see this go. And then we'll
So
kind of give our 2 cents on it.
yeah, so really, I mean, obviously the main retcon that's made has to do with Damien's origin, because in the original movie, he is born of a jackal, which Father Brennan knows, and we then find the remains of the jackal in the burial site next to Robert's biological son.
One of the best
Which
scenes
is,
of the movie, in my
was a
opinion.
heartbreaking scene, gorgeous, like visually, the set's amazing, just beautiful.
And then getting
Um,
chased by dogs.
It's amazing. It's such a good sequence. Um, so that's the biggest retcon, because here we do not have a jackal birth. Margaret gives birth to Damien. In the original, there's been no connotations of Damien having siblings. Like, that's another thing that they just threw in, but it's not really a retcon. It's just something that they're adding in that could still theoretically exist in the world of the first movie, but it's just like peripheral to the story that we're following there. But I mean, I'm not really aware of too many other retcons aside from the motivations of the church as well. Was the other thing, which this is probably a hot take, but I actually thought that the motivation that the church had in this movie was more interesting than what they had in the original. Because in the original, it's very simple. They're Satan worshippers and they're trying to bring about the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Done and done. The church in this movie is basically trying to breed the Antichrist as a response to the counterculture movement that was happening throughout the 60s and into the early 70s, where people were rebelling against a lot of structural elements of society, and one of those was religion. And the church is now afraid of losing power, so they're trying to bring about this evil to force people who are no longer believing in it to believe, so that they can kind of regain some of the power that they're losing. Because they're, I think, what did I say in my video? I think it was like, if someone doesn't believe in God or hell, telling them that if you don't abide by the church's rules, God will send you to hell doesn't mean anything. So they want to keep their influence. So they're basically trying to raise this thing that will scare the nation into relying on them again, which I thought was such a cool.
Dude, I 100%
retcon.
agree. No, I
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
that is the one area that I feel actually there's a couple areas where I feel they improved upon the original. That is one though, 100%. Like, I
It's
think that
so-
is way more situational and more real, opposed to just they're they're Satan worshipers. That's boring. That's not that's so convenient. This is way more
100%.
situational, and I
Especially 'cause
really dug that.
Yeah, and part of the story with the Antichrist is, I think part of the thing to me that makes it so compelling is the way that story is grounded in our everyday life, because it's the Antichrist infiltrating politics. So I think giving the motivations behind the Antichrist coming a much stronger political connotation was a really smart thing to do. And the story that they gave was so fascinating to me. Like, when we were learning about why this whole process is going on, I was thinking, like, you don't usually go into a prequel expecting that it's going to do something better than the original. To me, that was an improvement. I like it more.
I like that too, and I have to admit, I don't actually dislike. Really, the only one that I question, that I agree with Jake, that feels very Marvel movie, and they haven't gotten there yet, is the whole sister angle. I thought it was a neat twist. I definitely, but I've only seen the first film and I've seen your videos, so I didn't know if that was like a thing that was,
No.
just a sidebar comment at some point. So I had to get clarification from you. But it was one of those things where I actually really like that motivation, because it goes back to making Damien feel much more like a weapon to the church, much more like this this overarching threat that if we can control the ultimate evil on earth, we're unstoppable. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, they just have the devil himself walking amongst them, and they can basically have him do whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, I thought that was really strong and really well done. And honestly, I like that the jackal is the one that's basically doing the impregnating instead of being impregnated. I think that's way more gross and way more
Yeah.
evasive, and it plays on that SA angle and the church and everything. It's just like it really hits those chords a much more like I guess stronger than just thinking that some dude fucked a jackal and that's how
Yeah.
we got the thing. But like I think that like overall it really adds a lot of strength to it. And not to mention I thought that the sequences they opened the film with it of her with the getting the bag placed over her head and then them tying it, like that's
Hmm.
the way they frame the jackal. I will say when it's a CGI flaming jackal, I was a little bit like, okay, that's fine, I can
Yeah.
forgive it, but it's
Yeah.
like it's a little hokey. But like the way they framed it before, all practical effects and everything, that was fucking creepy. That was another scene that made me feel gross.
I think
I
about how Rosemary's Baby handled this in a similar way. And I
Mhm.
like I kind of feel like, yeah, I'm kind of with you, Dylan. I think when he was on fire and all that, it's just a little much.
Yeah.
I don't think we needed that. I loved the teases of the monster, and I think
Oh, yeah.
that's really well done throughout the entire film. Which once again, Rosemary's Baby vibes the whole time, and in a good way. It doesn't feel like we're just ripping that out of that movie. They definitely kind of take it. They take their own approach, which is nice because of the style, because of the way that it's perceived in the film. It's always associated with the SA stuff, like you were talking about, and I don't know. It's really haunting. It kind of creates a whole another level of fear to it that, in a way, you're kind of never expecting from religious horror. But obviously, it has to be present here. It was really good until he was on fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
all
No,
I got.
I don't disagree. I think it would have been fine if they just left it like see the curtain burning and you hear a sound behind the curtain or something. Like we didn't need to see that. I mean, it was a cool design and like the CGI. It's not
was
like
cool.
it's not like the CGI was like poorly done. But you can tell it's CGI, and then you're like, we didn't really need to see that.
Fire is so hard to do
It's
with
yeah.
CGI, and,
Yeah.
and in my opinion, as I've gotten older and more films are doing it, I feel like it cheapens anything. And when you have a CGI creature and you add an abundance of CGI fire to it, I feel like there is always that thing in my head that just is like, I mean, and let's be honest, especially with how well they handled the jackal with all the practical effects and
Yeah.
everything, and the way they were cutting away from it, it did just kind of feel like that's too much. Like
Have
you
you seen
didn't
The
have to
Boogeyman?
do it. Oh yeah, yeah.
You remember
yeah,
that
no.
at the end of that movie, they had a very
Mhm.
similar thing.
Yes, exactly. And that's another movie, perfect example there, Evan, with all the fire and how they
Yeah.
handled that. Like
Yeah.
it cheapened it. It's like I still like that movie.
I think
still
it hurts
it's
more
fun.
here because to me the first Omen doesn't feel cheap overall. I like the Boogeyman, but it's like it's not
It's
as
a popcorn movie. It's fun.
it is a
Yeah.
popcorn movie.
It's
Yeah,
got some
so
good
it's like
scares, but you're there for the fun. The
Yeah.
first Omen really had the potential, at least for myself, and I think I can say for Jake too, of really, there are so many great moments and so many moments and so many things to love about it, that the parts that let you down, they just let you down that much harder. And
Yeah.
it's tough. It was honestly, since I've been doing this with Luke, him and I both agree this was probably one of the hardest films for us to review, because without being able to say spoilers and do this, without really being able to, articulate exactly what my issues were, it really just made me come off and feel like I was just bitching, because like I would say positive things technically and positive things about the acting and all the general things that people usually complain about in reviews if they don't like something. But like when the issues are just at the core of that script, it makes it really hard
Yeah.
to critique it.
I'm really excited. Like a couple months down the line, I'm gonna make another video about this. Once I've like seen it a few more times and it's settled in a little more, I want to do like a more in-depth like essay style video for it, because I feel like there is so much to unpack, and I mean, I also want to make sure that I'm acknowledging some of the issues more, because there are issues with the movie, but again, I was so drawn in by the stuff that I was enjoying that I didn't find myself paying too much attention to them. I didn't find I was being pulled out. So once I have a bit more of an objective viewpoint on it, I'm excited to revisit it and dive into all of those little details
I do want to see it again. Like I
Yeah.
will say that as much as I was kind of like, as much as I walked
I'm
out of
gonna
that
be buying
theater.
it.
That's fair. I mean, honestly, I think after talking about this franchise so much, I think I want to buy the box set and this movie, just own the whole franchise. Even though I walked out of the theater
worth it
a
for
little
Omen 4
disappointed.
alone.
Oh well, that's the best one. I mean, come on, man. Damien's daughter. That's amazing. Who doesn't want that? No, but I don't know, man. After leaving the theater and being a little underwhelmed, I will say that is so different. For like, if you talked to me 20 minutes into that movie, I had a totally different take about it than I did after finishing the whole thing. So it really makes me want to give it a second watch. This is a film that is very much so deserving of it because of how impressed I was by the first 50%. So I think honestly, I feel like my viewpoint is going to change yet again after I watch it again. But I've
Sleeping
only once
on it
again
changed my thoughts.
sleeping on it. I think giving it another watch and really just trying to appreciate the good in it, opposed to just like kind of picking out the bad, if that makes sense. I think I'll have a different take on it. This is such an impressive movie in the first 50%. I really think I got to give it another go.
I agree. I'm genuinely, I think last night I probably would have said no, but I think like before we shot a review today, and I did bump my score up. I was going to give it a proceed with caution, which is like kind of like our D letter grade. I ended up giving this a C, and who knows, it could grow on me more. I could learn to kind of let bygones be bygones with some of the choices. And honestly, this is easily a film that could be improved if they do follow it up with a sequel and we see where the story continues. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
I'm just
got
very intrigued.
strong enough elements. Yeah.
And that's another great point, Dylan. Like if they make another one of these and it fucking rocks and it like somehow wraps all these storylines together in a really good way, I think it would retroactively make this movie so much better. I'd be like, all right, I'll take
done
it.
before with other movies, man.
what's
Like, yeah, 100%.
100%.
Yeah.
What's really exciting about that to me is that this script, well, Arkasha was involved with writing it. The script had been completed before she was attached to the project, and then she came in and she was working on it after the fact.
Yeah.
And now she's saying that she has ideas for a continuation.
Good.
And we can see, obviously, we're all in agreement that like her hands on this movie are by far the best thing about it. So if she can just helm this herself, like if we get written and directed by Arkasha Stevenson,
Yes.
I'm gonna be so hyped for
Me too.
whatever continuation they do, because like everything she touched in this movie is golden. And I think you can definitely you can tell that there were 4 cooks in the kitchen on this one. But if she just gets to do the whole thing, like they could really. And if they do pull off, as you're saying, if they do pull off a continuation, then for me it's just going to solidify things here with this, where I'm just going to be like even happier with it.
I think that's a good enough spot as anywhere, gentlemen, to leave this off. So why don't we send
Wait,
our
I had this
sign
hat
up.
on the whole time. I look fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, who wears hats during an hour-long podcast?
Oh, dude, I just got like my peripheral vision back, and I'm all thrown off.
I was gonna say like the tentacles were like covering up most of your eyes.
It was over my eye. I couldn't see shit.
It was very strange to talk to you while that was going on. But yeah, I think that's as good a place as any. I thank you, gentlemen, for coming on and talking some spoilers with me. See, Evan, that wasn't so bad. We didn't bully you too hard. I think we had a very constructive combo.
I'm probably gonna go to bed and cry. I'm hurt.
Oh, well, you know, maybe you shouldn't. Oh, see, yeah, you made it sad. You shouldn't leave
sad
I
any
have like
comments.
4 more hats, Jake. Don't make me get up.
You think you can out-hat me? That's hilarious, Doug.
Alrighty, well, anyway, oh my god. I'm just trying to close off the video here, guys.
For context, Dylan invited us here at 9 o'clock and it is almost 11. I'm so sorry, dude.
It's fine. It's okay.
Oh, shit. Oh, my God. Look at all this. Evan, you win this time, but next time we're here,
It's
you don't
just
even
gonna be
know.
hats on top of hats.
You don't even know, man.
My headphones are not touching my ears right now. I'm just cranking them.
I didn't expect this when I was pitching this idea to you gentlemen, but I'm glad it happened. I'm glad we talked some Omen. And why don't you guys let the audience know where they can find you? Of course, I will have you guys linked in the description and be sharing this with all the socials. But let them know where they can find you. Evan, what's your channel? Where can these boys subscribe to you?
So yeah, I'm my channel is Rocklin Graves Productions. I just do like horror video essays. That's basically all I make. Sorry.
And Jake,
Passing
what
it
about
off to
you?
the King of Rats.
Well, I'm Killjoy Jake, and I make cooking videos. So come on over and see me make chicken marsala specifically. That's my latest upload. So go give it a watch.
There you go. And of course, you guys know me. I'm Dylan. And yeah, thanks for stopping by. And yeah, I guess as always, stay scared.
Do the horse shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.